Hi, I'm Bill, the artist behind the art class demos and some of the other art instruction videos that you've seen on my channel. I hope you've enjoyed the videos and that somehow they've helped you in your journey as an artist. At the end of this video, I'm going to talk to you about Patreon. It's a program that I learned about just in the last couple of months. So watch at the end of the video and I'll explain what Patreon is all about. I'm taping these primarily so that you guys can look back and see how I mixed all the colors and all of that, since we can't, I mean, there's just no way to cover all of that in an individual class. It's just too much time. I'd never get through with a painting if I tried to go step by step. Besides that, as you can see, this isn't formula work. There's no step by step. It's just, a lot of it's just intuition, feeling it out, and trying to use best judgment. All right. Actually, this camera can be a real hassle. Gets in the way. All right, we'll get the walnut oil out here. And okay, so we're going to do these. Some of those I think, I don't know, it doesn't look like magnolias or marigolds in there, does it? They look more like, actually, they might be nasturtiums. I can't remember what they were. All right, so flowers from our garden. And then some of the flowers that I put into this painting I made them up, just based on what I've seen before and just to get particular colors in there. So that's a nice thing about a lot of what we do, is we can use our imaginations and create things as we go.
Are some of those Gerber daisies? Gerber?
Oh, they might be.
Or zinnias?
Zinnias, yeah. Yeah, you know, we grew them 2 years ago and I can't remember what they were. I've got the seed packets for them, so I'd have to look up and see what they were.
Really thick daisies.
Uh-huh. They were pretty though. They were fun. All right. So the flowers, I want to really emphasize how bright they are. All of those bright yellows and the light coming onto them. So what is it that we use to help lights feel more bright and brilliant? Darks, that's right, we want to get some darks in there. So the first thing we can start with is that background and get some dark in there. And the light is kind of, overall, is more of a diffused setting. It wasn't a cloudy, stormy day, but it was more just a gentle overcast. So the light is more diffused and is going to be a little bit cooler. So all of my shadows are going to be more on the warm side overall. What color is what? The color I'm putting on there?
Yeah.
It's a mix of ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, transparent oxide red, and now I'm putting, I put a little bit of green into it, phthalo green, and then now I'm going to go more towards the lavender side of things with the ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, so that it kind of plays off of those bright oranges and yellows that we'll be putting in. So it's not going to be real obvious to the viewer that that's there, but the harmony of that will help with those flowers. Okay, so take a little of this off. And when you start to pull off some of that color, you can definitely see the lavender more and that sort of thing as well. Use the edges of my paper towel to kind of create some bits of grass and rocks and other things in there. And sneak down to this bottom here. If I can get down in there. In fact, maybe we'll go back to closer to the panel color here so we can get some brighter areas in there, just like I did in my original painting. Kind of create a pattern of light and dark. So the way I work here, it's not really in the sense of the early Impressionism, because they used a lot of broken brushstroke color, lots of small strokes overall, and they were letting the optical illusion of those blending bits of color create the image. Whereas for me, I use a lot more of the, I call it more of the Russian Impressionist, where the more bravura wide strokes, not so much the little teeny broken brush strokes. But I'm still trying to capture the impression of what I see as much as I am the actual objects. So put in a little bit more of those lavenders in here. So I kind of lay in trying to create some fun shadow and light pattern into the painting first, then I'll determine where I want to put my flowers, and in order to keep them bright and everything, I'll come in with my paper towel using some mineral spirits and really wipe that down to the panel again, so I can get back to the white of the panel. That way I can get my colors a lot more brilliant than trying to paint wet into this dark background that I have on there. But a lot of the stems and leaves and all of that, I don't have to worry about taking off my background. I can go right on top because that's going to be thicker paint. I'm not going to be worried so much about some of the thinner, translucent pigments that I'll be putting on there. So now I can just take all this off of here, get my palette back down to being nice and clean, and go from there. Start laying in the flowers. Oh, actually, I think I took my mineral spirits out of here and put the put the terpenoid natural, so I'll use that to get stuff off of here. The Gamsol is a little cleaner to work with, but this should be all right for today. Okay, so I want to kind of flow those flowers across. And I don't have to draw these perfectly into here. Just getting kind of an overall, and I can still apply a thick enough paint with the individual petals to come back over some of my background color. I'll probably eliminate a few flowers from what we did originally, especially for the expediency of the class today. Actually, I think I'll do 3 main flowers here, the bigger ones, and then just put in some of the smaller ones. That way we can see if we can get through enough of this and still leave you some time to do some work as well. Nice thing about panels, it's pretty easy to get back down to the white again. Okay, sorry about that. No idea. All right, so some of the other little flowers aren't as critical to get them down to the white, but I'll take a couple here and there. And part of it, I don't want to get too specific because as I go along, I might just feel the need to change some things up. Oh, I thought I think they thought I didn't even hear who that was. I thought I turned it off and I hit go. They must have thought they were on a machine. They were leaving a message. I won't even get the message now. I'll have to call them back later and see who that was. Oh boy, that was good. That's the artist brain for you. I turned up the heat in here. Is it too hot for everybody? Yeah. I'm not used to it being this hot. I didn't want you guys to be too cold though. Is that right? Yeah. Oh, that door got closed. Actually, I leave that ajar for the plants, for all of our plants out there. If we could, sorry, that might let a little bit of a cool breeze in, but otherwise our plants out there on the sunroom will freeze to death. Like that one? Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll quickly lay in just some basic colors here. Get rid of this. Won't need that anymore. And remember, we don't use the Terpenoid Naturals as a medium, just as a cleaner. But it's just fine to use it to wipe off some of this because I'm not leaving a large film of it anywhere.
An oil slick.
What's that?
An oil slick.
Yeah, that's right. It's not going to stop our paints from drying. Okay. So these yellow flowers, I'll start with a bright yellow undertone. Oops, picking up the other.
Did any of you help with that portrait of the little kid's mother? You did? Yeah. I bet that was awesome, huh?
Yeah, it really was.
I saw that on TV, it was really cool.
The Artist Guild this week saw something in the paper about the Artist Guild. So he got a hold of Susie Woods and asked, he said his wife had died and 5 years ago, and he has 4 kids, had no photo of her except for one black and white photo that had been crumpled up. That's all he had. And he wondered if anyone in the guild would be willing to try to paint from that. And all he had was $30, but he would be willing to pay. And so Susie brought it to our next meeting. And
Let's see.
he ended up getting the first paintings. I mean, 7 paintings. And 14 people wanted to. 7 different mediums. Oil, watercolor, acrylic. And then every painting was different. You know, we didn't really know. We just did this in color. So then we had an evening where we presented the paintings to him, to his children, and so every child got a painting from their mother. It was really neat.
Would be emotional.
Gives us
Yeah, that was a good thing that they did with all that. Okay, we're going to start laying in some petals now, getting some of those drawn out. And I'm taking and putting a lot more pressure out here in the background area when I lay the brush in, and then pulling up and away so that I lessen the pressure as it comes into the middle, because I want this middle to stay more of the brighter colors, and I'm going to have some of those dark colors touching the outside. So I'm not too worried about getting exact drawing or any of that. Just kind of creating an overall feeling of where the petals are going to go right now. and some of the more shadowed areas as well of the flowers. And then in some areas I'll just kind of take some of the color I'm using and dabble it here and there just to kind of create a harmony of colors in there so that it kind of ties all the things together, the background, the flowers, and all of that. So let me show you how I could take this right here. Well, let's see, then I'd have to bring that a little bit smaller probably. I could turn this one into 2 petals fairly easily. Easily, what does that mean? Nothing in art is necessarily easy, but readily, I should say. Let's see, first we'll come in and brighten up this middle area. But if I just take and break this in half a bit with just an edge, where the sun's catching one of the edges of that, then I can separate that into becoming 2 petals. I guess ease is relative, isn't it?
You're gonna put this on the on the YouTube, right?
Yep, you'll have access to all this afterwards. So put a little bit of shadow into that, and suddenly we have a petal that starts to 3-dimensionally come out forward towards us. And then right now it feels like it's pulling over that way, which wouldn't make much sense as a flower, but we can start to pull that down. Oops, didn't realize I still had so much paint on there. Okay, we can start pulling that down towards the center of the flower. In fact, all right, so to create some of these other lighter petals, we can simply take one of these areas and pull a highlight across it, and we start to pull that petal away from the other mass of color behind it, and start turning it into a separate petal as well. Yes, very light touch. And I'm making sure that I have my brush a nice, clean, crisp edge to it. And then when although looks like I'm getting a couple of flares on that one, which would not be a good thing. So anyway, and then I just get some paint on the very edge, and especially on the corner of the brush, and just kind of lightly touch that on there. There are a lot of different ways to get that on there. I could use a round and use the point of a round, or I could use one of my small mongoose hair brushes that are nice and sharp as well. So I tend to stay with the bristle brushes as much as I can in the early stages especially. So this one here, if I want to keep that back away, farther out, I can just take a little shadow, make it a little bit darker. And it doesn't have to necessarily be dark, because I can make it feel darker by putting a bright highlighted edge on it. And I don't want to just create an outline around each of the petals. I don't want it to feel as if each one was done exactly the same way and there's some kind of a formula to it. So I try to avoid that, especially in the early stages, by creating abstract patterns and shapes rather than individual petals right from the beginning. I can start forming individual petals by pulling them out of the abstract shapes. And that way I can keep much more of a variety going on in there. And it gives me the opportunity to manipulate each of those individual components to better suit my composition or to help create the feeling that I want the viewer to experience. So there's not, at this point, there's really nothing absolute about any of this. It's all in flux. I can change at my whim as I go along. Okay, so creating the little inner area, all those little bits of pollen that can cause so many of us anguish each summer. We can start to create some of that just by a few little bright dabs of paint and some shadowed, the dark little bits of whatever all that stuff is that's in there. And I can never remember all that. Study it, and then I forget it. What all the little teeny bits of stuff are called. Stamens and all that. I can remember some of that, but I probably should study it so that when I'm talking about it, it's a little bit more accurate. But it really doesn't affect whether I can paint it or not to know what it is.
Just say little dot things.
Yeah. That one was a little bit too obvious there. Too large and demanding just too much attention. Warm that up a little bit with a little bit of some red. And you can see I'm letting the brush, the bristles, when I grab a hold of this paint, I'm letting a lot of the bristles do the work, because these petals on these flowers have lots of little striation work in them. You know, they're not just a solid block of color when you look at them. So I'm trying to recreate that by using the bristles on the brush. And when I come down like that on it, it's because the brush stroke has caught the light in such a way, all those little bristle strokes are catching the light so that it creates a glare. And that glare will stay there when it's put onto a gallery wall. So I'm knocking down those bristles so they're not catching the light wrong. I don't want it makes the value look like it's a brighter value than it is. So I don't want to leave those there. So you can see how quickly we can start to form the semblance of a flower. And with a lot less complication than going in there, you know, very carefully and delineating each individual petal as we're painting it. We can pull out petals wherever we want them to be. And I don't clean my brush entirely, but when I'm working with such a stark contrast between dark and light, I'll either grab another brush or just quickly wipe off some of the thicker paint that I have on here so I can work with my brighter color. So on that one, I'm basically, even though it's a more diffused light, there's still generally a direction that the light is coming from. You're going to have one area that's going to be a little brighter than another. So on mine, I'm determining that the light's still coming from this direction, so I'm going to catch some of the tops of the petals here and more of the full-on petal on this side of the flower. That makes sense? So keeping in our minds our light source really can help us to create the three-dimensional or realistic quality of the subject, because we have a shadow side and a light side, and that can help us to know so that we don't get lost in creating these. It'll help us to keep that going in the right direction all around the painting. Always maintain the direction of our light source. All right, let's see. And in creating flowers, it's not always as quickly developed as this. Sometimes I can go in here and have to keep wiping it off and starting over again. What's a danger with flowers is getting too heavy-handed too quickly and things become stiff or overworked, or they just feel lumpy. They just don't, yeah, they don't feel like they have any real light, luminous quality to them. They feel too heavy. You know, the petals start to feel too heavy. So that's one of the things that I work really hard at, is keeping those petals so they feel like they're as light as if you were holding the flower in your hand. And trying to get it so that I was at a show once, one of my paintings of roses was up, and somebody came by and said, wow, I can smell the roses. You know, they almost look like you're looking at the flowers, and it brings back all those senses, everything that you experience when you're right there. That's kind of what the goal is here with all of this. Okay, so I think in my original painting I had this petal back here that was bright. I think I'm going to leave it darker, just so that that edge right there pulls out towards us more. And then maybe come in with one over this direction a little bit. That might have a little bit more lighter, as if it's laying back towards the light. Putting these up on YouTube, I had a comment on one of the demonstrations, and a lady she said that I needed to be much more articulate about each thing that I was doing, each color that I was using, why I was doing everything that I was doing. And she recommended a fellow, Paint with Kevin, I think. And so I looked at Paint with Kevin's work, and you know, I love what he's doing as far as sharing his work with people, but he was self-trained by watching PBS, watching Bob Ross and some of the artists there, especially Bob Ross, and he has a style reminiscent of Bob Ross. So I had to explain to her that this isn't paint by number. There's nothing formulaic about what I do. Even though this one I was able to develop up quickly because I've already done it. But other than that, and so I've worked through a lot of the problems that come with it and some of the thought processes, but there's nothing formulaic about any of this. It's very intuitive, and hopefully that by watching the demonstrations that I do here, you'll get a sense of how to let your intuition kind of guide you more in your work, while at the same time always having in the back of our thinking all the academics, all the things that we've learned about values, edge quality, color temperature, composition, all of that. So all of those things are important, but in the end, it's about producing something that feels lifelike, and that's much more than just academics. And definitely much more than some kind of formula can produce. All right, so we'll go over here and I'll develop up one that's more on the yellow side of things. We have a lot of the oranges and stuff in that flower. And I'll create one with more of the oranges. Actually, here, let me get a couple of bright touches on some of these other petals so you can see how to pop those out of there. Like that. And then this kind of pull around here. Actually, that's probably enough on that one right now. Let's get on to another flower. So if I could, I would love to explain step by step what I'm doing while I'm doing it, but then we'd never get finished with this. So we just have to, there has to be some compromises in here. All right, so the same thing. Really, what we're doing is we're establishing light and dark patterns in the big spaces, like the background that we did, and in the smaller spaces with each petal, with the overall flower. Everything is light and dark patterns. So with this, the only way, like coming in here with bright yellow on here isn't going to tell us that there's a flower there unless we have light and dark. So I can put in a couple of bright petals like that. But then the only way that those are really going to stand out is if I come in with darker colors behind, and not even close to being that dark. So when we're talking about light and dark patterns on something that's fairly bright overall, very light, the shadows are not going to be nearly as dark as what we might think that they are when we're looking at them, except for a couple spots, maybe where the background colors are pulling through spaces between petals. That's where we might have a real dark spot coming through. But on the flower itself, when it's that bright, we don't want to get necessarily too dark with the shadows, but enough shadow work and darkness in there to let the lights really shine. And I like to have petals that are, especially on daisies and things, that are a little bit wild. Like a wild hare that just doesn't want to sit down. You know, this is a non-gel using daisy here. And then I try to keep the idea of pulling these petals at least back into the center. That if I keep my eye on this center with my drawing, then at least the petals will be attached the way that they're supposed to. But from that point on, I can basically do all kinds of things with them, twisting and turning and jumbling them around. But if they're not attached to the center, then they're probably falling out of the flower, okay? Okay, so this side here is going to be more of my shadow area. The light, remember, is coming this direction. So I can keep a lot more of the darks here and lighter over on this side. And then I'm going to come in here and break this yellow space up by using the brush that I did the background colors with. And maybe shorten up some of these as well. There we go. All right, that'll give us a better shape. So what I was doing there was turning the flower a little bit rather than having it as round. This one here is nice and round and facing us. This one's going to be upside down, and then this one turned just a little bit to the side and upwards. Okay, so same concept here. We want to take some of these petals and make them, basically, in order to make this flower feel like it's a little bit sideways to us rather than full on, some of these petals are going to have to be foreshortened. Kind of like looking at your hand or looking at somebody's hand that's pointing at you. You don't see the full arm, you just see kind of the fingers and the hand side of things. Well, the same thing with the petals. We don't come in here and do a whole long petal. We have just a little nub of a petal sitting out here. Just catching the tips of those petals. So if we have a tip of a petal right there, we're also going to have a little bit of a darker shadow down below it, because that means that we have something, how do I explain that? Basically, we're really close in seeing where it's attaching, and so that's not going to have nearly as much light coming to it as these ones that are out here and catching more of the ambient light that's around. So if I add a shadow into there like that, it'll really help to punch those little bits of highlighted tips of the flowers out more. Okay. And then I can come in and break up some of these spaces, make it more interesting rather than fully petals everywhere all the way around. I can come in and make it feel like the ground is poking through by bringing in some background color.
I never thought about using a dry brush to do that.
Oh, dry brushes are very handy. Very handy tools, yes. Okay, and then I'll get a little bit more of the structure around the center here. Okay, let's see. First, we'll start to build into the center area by pulling some of the petals out and making sure that they feel like they're going towards it. So we know that that's our center. Okay, so even when I put in a stronger shadow like that, I'm generally not going to leave it like that. I want to get it in there, get the impact right away, and then start to play with the edges a little bit, manipulating it, because that shadow is not going to be necessarily that strong all the way across there. So I can do that. Not that brush. By pulling across that so I can break it up. Then down here where it's starting to attach closer to the area of the middle of the flower, I can have it a little bit stronger maybe. But don't be afraid to take an edge and pull it right across there, and then that edge gets more of a boost. And then kind of pull down here at the base of the petals. Get some more shadow work in there. All right, so in creating this little center area, I don't have to create it by coming in here and making a nice little round circle. I can also do it by painting around the edges of it, creating it that way as well. So if I want it to feel like the light is coming down and hitting the petals right around it, it's a little bit brighter light, I can come in and start pulling paint around it and create a center that way. Although that's a terrible looking center. Okay, so I didn't like that center, and now I'm gonna have to start it all over again. Had to switch my media in there. I ran out of space on my card. Okay, so I'm trying to create some middle value, comparatively speaking. Remember, everything's relative. So creating some middle value yellows to go along with the brighter highlighted petals that are sticking out. And especially to contrast against the darker petals that we have in there. I'm just experimenting a little bit with some light and dark on this to see if I can get it to have a better, more interesting shape and pattern to it. Closer. This one doesn't have the same little globules in there, little dots of color. What time is it? Probably won't take this too much farther, so that you guys can have an opportunity to try this out. Let's see, I'll show you a little bit of creating the back of this flower right here. Then maybe next time we can finish this one off a little bit more to get to a better state so that you guys can have some time to paint. All right. This is a 9 by 12. So I need to figure out where I want this coming from. Oh, that's terrible. That's straight across. Nothing fun about that. So, just wipe that off again. Start over. Okay. So, it's as if I didn't even draw it in my head first. So, kind of want it to have a nice curve here. And this one the original was a little bit bigger, so this one might be a little small for having it go that direction. Maybe if I take it off start taking these off instead of across, that might work out better. Yeah, I think I'll do that. Change the direction of that. Just so that the green doesn't interfere too much with the yellows that I'll be putting in there. So I'm going to change the direction and have it come off. Which means the light will be lost down in here. light catching on here. Warm that up a bit. We'll be more up in these areas. And I'm going to that nearly as thick as it. I was just trying to increase the angle of that stroke more so that it was more interesting to look at rather than a straight line up and down. Then if you want to create on that bright area on here. Light and dark, yes.
That was the magic stroke.
And you can really do the same thing to the areas down below too. Create much brighter spots on it. So that, and then a couple of leaves. Let me put some of those in so you can see how some of that might be created. Come in just with little plants that don't necessarily have to mean anything to anybody. They don't have to be anything specific. But I can start to create. And remember, same thing, light and dark pattern. You have areas where leaves are going to be brighter and areas where the sun's not getting to them. Let's see here. What greens did I use? Boy, I'm probably going to tell you wrong and we'll look at the video and say, ah, that wasn't it. Okay, I used, yeah, this is that sap green deep that Utrecht makes. I really like that color. I believe I used some of that. And let's see. That's fun. Okay. My greens generally are made from a combination of things here. Let's see. So sap green deep can create this darker one, and then I added some alizarin crimson to it. Not that much alizarin crimson. And then maybe a little bit of white, just to so it's not so dark. And some cad yellow medium. And a little bit more of that. And we can start to get, depending. And all of this depends on how cool or warm I want that particular, that particular hue to be. Some of my darker greens I'll have a little bit warmer, some of them a little more cool. When I say warm and cool, I'm talking about color temperature. And then of course that's all relative. So this would be a little bit on the warmer side. See that one right there. Compared to if I just used more of the sap green deep itself is more on the cooler side, more on the blues. So you can see the difference. See, that's more on the yellow side, and that's more on the blue side of things. They're both darks compared to these, which are very bright. So then, same thing within bright areas, I can have warm color temperature for the brights, and I can have cooler color temperature. So if I used more of the cad lemon in my greens and white, that can start cooling things down because the cad lemon is cooler than the cad yellow medium in color temperature. And then when I add white, that really cools it down. And of course, if we add too much white, it becomes pasty and it loses all of its color. It loses all of its hue. So I don't generally do that. And then if I want, I can take that same green and start adding a little bit of some blue to it, maybe some of the manganese blue, and really start to cool down that. It's still bright, especially if I add more white to it. I can still have So if I place this one next to that bright color, you can see one is more on the blue cooler side and the other is on the yellow, but they're both still bright. And so using a variety of these warm and cool greens throughout the piece makes it much more naturalistic. It's a much better feeling to it. So instead of getting into a pattern of just using, picking up a green off of the palette or something, I use a combination of things to manipulate the warm and cool of it and the dark and light value of it. So I'm constantly varying up the color temperature and the value as I go along. All right, so anything else you want me to cover today? Or should we go on so you guys can do some painting for a while and then finish it up next time?
Just kind of like to see the one that you put the stem on, how you're going to do the under color. Like, are you going to leave that on the bottom of the flower, the ruffly lighter
Like
part?
right here?
Will you?
So you want me to put in some of those petals? Okay. It's the same concept as what we did with the other petals on these other flowers. I'll take, like we can have some lighter flowers coming in here, because we are getting this more from a side view of the flower. So the foreshortening going on here. And then we can pull some of the darker petals underneath. And then these ones I'm going to have off here a little bit in the shadows as well. So really we're going to have that be our focal point on that particular flower overall. Okay. And so I can utilize some of that darker stuff that I put in there by not coming all the way over it, leaving some of that so it creates the shadow underneath that petal a bit. And I can also come back in then and add some little bit more strong shadow work underneath these just by popping them in here this way and really make those upper petals stand out more. It's always the darks that make those lights much more apparent. We can create ruffles in the flowers with our shadow pattern as well. Now, some of these can also come in. They won't be quite as bright as what we'll put up here, but we can have some, like a petal down here where the tip of it is starting to catch the light. Just like that. And then I'll get some real bright yellow. Out on some of these tips. Just like that. So the more we play with that, the more the three-dimensional quality will come out of it. And I can get a little bit stronger color, generally where the flower intersects the stem. You can have some stronger color, deeper in value and hue, than out towards the edge where the sun is bleaching it out a little bit. So I might just pop a couple of bits of real bright or real deep shadow color into that. Not necessarily so much up top here. And if we really want something to pop, might just put a little touch of real dark work down in there. That's how we can start to develop that up. Do you want me to get more specific about anything in there, or is that kind of what you were looking for? Does that help? All right. And then of course, you know, we can start to form this flower as well by getting the background coming up into there. So let's take some lavender color and start pulling that back into the flower here and creating individual petals by drawing into it with our background color. And also making some of that stand out a lot more. Actually, I don't want such strong shadows necessarily back in there, but maybe down in these areas here. And against that stem, it can also help pop that out a way too. So I can play with a lot of that. Start drawing into that flower and shaping it by using our background. So it doesn't all have to be about painting in the particular individual petals so much as it's a back and forth between drawing with our background and drawing the actual petals themselves that way. So this flower over here would do well to have a dark area around that middle thing to get it to stand out a little bit more. And then once I start putting in some of that, I'll come back. I generally would come back in and touch back up some of the petals that come near it. I don't necessarily like that dark color there. Okay, and then maybe I'll grab some of that real bright. Just like that. Help pop those away. So, how's that for today? Does that help you to get started on a piece? All right, so that'll be a good thing for everyone to practice and really set in your minds the idea of dark and light and how that can create the three-dimensional lifelike quality of flowers. Okay, and we'll continue this one on our next class. Patreon was created by a musician whose fans wanted to do something to repay him for all of the videos that he put out on the internet for free. Producing videos like the art instruction videos that I've been doing takes a lot of resources, money, time, especially time. And most artists don't usually have a lot of either of those in hand. So he created Patreon to kind of mimic the patrons of centuries ago who loved the arts and wanted to support the arts. I've put thousands of dollars and hundreds of hours into making these videos available. The editing on some of these has taken a lot of time and a huge learning curve for me just to figure out how to make it all work. And I've had several fans ask how they can help. Well, Patreon makes that possible. So if you're enjoying these videos and you want in any way to help offset the costs involved in creating them, then please click on the button below and go to my Patreon account and see what I offer there and how you can help. I appreciate everything that you do, and I appreciate you watching the videos. Like most artists who teach and share what they've learned, I really hope that these videos are a blessing to you and that they help propel your journey as an artist. So whether you choose to help make these videos possible or not, please feel free to keep watching and enjoying them. Now for those who choose to help me keep these videos coming in the future, thank you very much. And besides these videos themselves, I have some other great gifts that I'm offering as well. So go over to my Patreon account and see what I've got in store for you there. Thank you very much. You guys have a great time painting. Masterpiece. Oh, and before you go, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And if you're interested in any of my videos, just go to my website at inmanfinearts.com and you can find them all there. Have a great day painting.